asking them in 2020 what they wanted to see from an improved bus network. And we've put that in with our pitch, really, to the Combined Authority about what a good bus network would look like. We've paid very close attention to some individual bus service routes. We've long supported from here the Ely Zipper model, which I go on about all the time, but it is a great model because it's just a very simple bus service, getting good numbers of people in a short space of time to where they want to go. And, you know, we try to give it longevity and security. It is funded, you know, it is subsidised by the Combined Authority. They let the contract. But we try and nurture it locally. So we've had councillors working at all individual schemes to get more people using it, to get the public subsidy down. And it is a very successful model that we want to try and replicate. We've also worked up a great piece of cross-party work, the bus strategy, and another cross-party piece of work was the cycling and walking strategy to try and improve active travel solutions, which we have and we've published. And again, that is a document to try and help us bring in funding. And again, we're not directly funded to deliver some of these what are very expensive pieces of infrastructure because we're a rural area and they're long pieces of infrastructure. But in fact, we've actually commissioned Sustrans to deliver feasibility studies for priority routes that we want to try and get funding in for first. And in fact, we did recently agree growth and infrastructure funding to actually deliver a real cycle route, not just bits of paper and plans, a real cycle route. So it's some funding towards the Surrey to Wicken cycleway. So I think it's fair to say that this district council has done more than most, and we continue that work. And as I say, we have a seat at the Combined Authority table where we are pushing hard and recognise the need for better public transport infrastructure. And I will try and cover later on in my introduction to the main response to the GCP, some of the things that we think that they should be kind of getting on with quickly instead of talking about them. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Councillor Bailey. If I can, we are now live streaming. We started live streaming during Councillor Bailey's response. So if I can just mention to members of the public and press who are watching online, we had a problem with the live stream. We didn't start the meeting until just after 20 to 6, so you missed 10 minutes of it, but it will be available on the YouTube for any members of the public or press who want to view that first 10 minutes. So many apologies if you've been hanging on to listen to the debate. At the moment, we are still on public questions. So for those of you who've got an agenda at home, thank you. The next question is from Sarah Parish. Is Sarah's with us? Okay. You want? Okay. Yeah.
You're welcome to read the statement out.
Okay.
Thank you.
As you say, it's more of a statement than a question, but please, if Tracy will read it out. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. It says, I use the bus regularly to get into Cambridge. I support the congestion charge because of the need for more reliable, frequent, extended and cheaper bus services in this district, and the congestion charge will fund this.
Yeah, as you say, it is more of a statement. I would ask that members take into consideration the comments made by Sarah in the debate, please. Thank you. Yeah, the next question I've got is from Josh Grantham. Yeah, Josh is with us. Okay. If you want to read your question. Have you got a copy of it? Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, some of these we've had previously by email, but obviously some we've just seen tonight, and that's one of them. Thank you.
Hello. My question is asked on behalf of the Cambridgeshire Sustainable Travel Alliance. The Combined Authority and its constituent councils, including East Cambridgeshire, signed up to the recommendations outlined in the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Independent Commission on Climate Report, which included a commitment to reduce car mileage by 15% using a 2019 baseline. Yet without policy intervention, the number of vehicular journeys in the region is projected to increase by 20% by 2031, which will increase car mileage and emissions. East Cambridgeshire District Council acknowledges in its draft the need for credible alternatives to the car in the form of both better public transport and active travel. The District Council also states that it understands this will require both capital and sustainable revenue funding to achieve this. However, at the same time, it does not support the introduction of road charging, which would provide the sustainable revenue mentioned above. The response does suggest the GCP develops the bus service improvement plan to attract government funding. The Combined Authority's first submission for bus service improvement funding was unsuccessful. An update given to the Combined Authority by Councillor Anne Hay in September 2022 identified insufficient commitment to road charging, active travel and bus priority schemes as a key reason for this. It will be difficult to deliver more bus priority schemes and active travel infrastructure in Cambridge without a reduction in congestion due to the lack of space in the city. Therefore, our question is, what solutions does East Cambridgeshire propose that would ensure the district meets its climate targets and the agreed regional commitments to reduce the number of car miles driven by 15%, whilst funding the much needed improvements to active travel and public transport in the district? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Grantham. Councillor Bailey, did you want to respond?
Yeah,
Thank you.
I'm happy to, thank you. And we've talked about the 15% car mileage reduction, which is absolutely recognised. That statement in the, so yes, it was a great shame that the Combined Authority missed out on the billions of funding for bus service improvements. It would have been clearly very helpful, particularly given the current climate of what's going on with bus services in Cambridgeshire. That statement around insufficient commitment to road charging, I've actually questioned where that has come from, and officers currently are not recognising where that has actually come from. The overview and scrutiny report said that it had come from Department for Transport. I've directly asked the head of the interim head of transport at the Combined Authority, who actually doesn't recognise it, and the jury's out on where that statement how it has found its way into that report. It is something I've discussed with government, and it's not something that I think is a requirement or was part of other successful bids to the bus service improvement money. So I'm not really sure that it's, I don't know how it's found its way in there. I think there are a number of solutions. There are lots of really short-term quick wins that the Greater Cambridge Partnership could be getting on with. There are further rounds of bus service improvement plan monies open for opportunity. The Combined Authority, we were supposed to be submitting an update to our BSIP in October. That hasn't happened. Apparently we've got an extension at the Combined Authority, but there are a number of solutions. It's something I will cover again in my introduction to the response to the paper, but there are much more ambitious solutions, and I have to say that I think the current proposals feel like a very 20th century solution to a 21st century city that absolutely deserves better, and I do think we can do better, and I will try and cover in the time allowed some more detail around that in my later discussion.
Thank you, Councillor Bailey. The next question we've got, and I can see her in the room, is Councillor Rebecca Dennis. If you want to read well, it's more of a statement probably than a question. Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Dennis.
Yes, it is. It is more of a statement. Councillor Rebecca Dennis. I'm chair of the Climate Change Committee on City of Ely Council. Climate change is here. We've seen instances of fire and flood around the world, but also in this country, with houses burning down in the summer around 70 miles away from this room. My sons and my nephews, along with the young relatives of everyone here, will face food and water shortages within their lifetimes. East Cambs Council knows the urgency and the depth of the crisis and has responded by declaring a climate emergency. The GCP proposals are a step in the right direction to address rising vehicle emissions. These were highlighted in the report Metro Mayor Palmer commissioned from the Independent Commission on Climate Change for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, where it stated 500,000 cars must be removed from Cambridgeshire roads to meet emissions targets. Now, you may say that conventional cars are being replaced by electric vehicles, or EVs as they're known. 1 million are on the country's roads at the moment. That's great, except availability of lithium for the manufacture of batteries for cars is problematic. EVs are expensive and fossil-fueled cars will remain polluting globally and locally. And frankly, even if EV production was sustainable into the medium term, say 10 years hence, government revenue from fuels is likely to be replaced by charging for the use of roads. In other words, the congestion charge element of the sustainable travel zone, it is the future. I'll finish with this. In discussions, I would urge you to consider what constructive suggestions you can make to improve the GCP proposals so that the decision makers can vote in favour of them.
Thank you, Councillor Dennis. As you say, it's more of a statement than the question. I would ask, as I did with one of the previous comments, if members could obviously take into consideration what Councillor Dennis has said during the debate and the discussion. Thank you. The next question we've got is from Sarah Whitebread. Sarah's not with us, no. So if Tracy could read the question out, thank you.
I would like to submit the following question for the meeting tonight. My question is, would the council support bus franchising in order to break Stagecoach's monopoly? And if so, how do they plan to fund this?
Thank you, Tracy. Councillor Bailey, did you wish to answer that?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, again, obviously, it's not the responsibility of this council, but we do have a seat at the table at the Combined Authority, which is the Transport Authority. I think it's alluded to in the draft response that we do support either enhanced bus partnership or franchising, whichever is deemed to be the better option for Cambridge and Peterborough once it's been properly looked at, because there are pros and cons. Franchising isn't necessarily the right way to go because it does come with a whole set of legal responsibilities and bureaucracy that can actually make it put barriers in the way of delivering what you're trying to do, is my understanding. But there is a lot of work to do at the Combined Authority to understand what is the best model. But my understanding is that even if you go for full franchising, you need to set up an enhanced bus partnership along that journey. And therefore, absolutely, we need to be expediting that piece of work, because to have a network that the Combined Authority has more control over in terms of, having an integrated timetable and ticketing and all of those other benefits, and most importantly, trying to run a decent network across the geography is a good thing, and it is included in our response.
Thank you, Councillor Bailey. We've now got a question from Judith Salmon, who's not here. If Tracy can read it out, it's on very similar lines to the previous question, actually.
I am very supportive of the sustainable travel zone, as we need to ease congestion in our city and lower carbon emissions. Can you tell me if you will be adopting a franchise model to provide active travel bus network in and around Cambridge, as at present buses in the surrounding villages are very poor? If you are going with the franchise concept for funding better buses, can you explain how you will fund and oversee this?
Thank you, Tracy. Did you want to respond?
Yeah, I mean, just briefly, I covered it really in what I previously said, but I'll just add, so the Combined Authority, I mean, it's very odd, the situation that we're in. I feel we're in a very bizarre situation where the Transport Authority hasn't got a position on the Greater Cambridge Partnership proposals, hasn't discussed it, and has no settled position, and I don't think the Mayor really does either. But at the Combined Authority, we are in the process of working up a new bus strategy, and we have an emerging local transport and connectivity plan, the LTCP, and these are parent documents really that will oversee the future of transport across the whole geography of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, part of which the GCP proposals are looking to coordinate with. But it is the Transport Authority that should be leading on that piece of work. And there is a lot of appetite, and I think a lot of agreement, across various chambers across the county, that some sort of model towards franchising has got to be a good thing, because it gives us better control. So I think there's a lot of agreement on that. I think the disagreement is around how that should be funded, and the Combined Authority absolutely needs to work up a proper funding strategy, which is possible and can be done, and has been done in many other areas across the country.
Thank you, Councillor Bailey. I've now got a question from Martin Wheatley, who I don't believe is here. So Tracy, if you can read that for us, please. Thank you.
Please could I ask the following question at public question time on the 15th of December. In correspondence with me about the current Making Connections consultation, the council leader said that there are many things that can be done to improve the situation, and which I believe it should be pursued first before the imposition of road charging. Could she list those things?
Councillor Bailey.
I'm happy to try and address some of that in my later discussion.
Okay, thank you. The next question, I'm not sure it's the final one I've got in my paper, or there's more, is from Jethro Gold, which I believe all members have had circulated, but it's more of a statement than a question. But if for the live stream, I think Tracy's going to read it out.
This is a statement from East Cam's Climate Action Network in response to the ECDC draft statement on the Making Connections proposals for transport from the Greater Cambridgeshire Partnership. Dear councillors, our group, East Cambridgeshire Climate Action Network, is disappointed with the District Council's draft response to the GCP plans. While there are some aspects we agree with, such as the call for improved rail services, overall, the response indicates that ECDC want to derail the consultation process rather than contribute to a constructive county-wide discussion about how we make the transport system in the county fit for the 21st century. As a group, we are broadly supportive of the GCP's plans and have submitted a consultation response accordingly. Councillors will be aware that there have been decades of political gridlock over transport in Cambridgeshire. The GCP proposals provide a possible pathway forward. We ask that councillors put aside party politics, which derailed previous transport proposals, and instead of bluntly opposing the GCP plan, consider what steps ECDC can take to help complement the proposed changes to the bus, active travel and park and ride networks. In the light of the draft response and the council's own commitment after declaring a climate emergency in 2019, we have some questions for councillors ahead of any vote to approve the draft response. Transport in Cambridgeshire's single largest source of greenhouse gas emissions. In the draft response, it states that no impact assessment has been undertaken by ECDC to assess the effect of rejecting the GCP proposals on the net zero target of 15% traffic reduction, which the council have signed up to. What is the justification for this? Does the council recognise that overall the proposals are going to be of benefit to residents of East Cambs through reduced traffic on major routes like the A10, reduced costs for buses and the park and ride? For example, the plans indicate that park and ride costs will be reduced to £1 with buses into Cambridgeshire every 10 minutes for 20 hours of the day, which represents a significant cost and convenience improvement for East Cambs commuters compared to parking in. Does the council recognise that improvements to the bus network and cycle infrastructure will be of benefit to people who cannot afford a car and for people with mobility issues who will benefit from greater accessibility on buses and from improved cycle infrastructure, which is also of benefit to users of wheelchairs, mobility scooters and adapted e-bikes? The lessons from other cities and countries are that to encourage a modal shift from cars to more sustainable and healthier forms of transport, a carrot and stick approach is required. In this case, the stick element is an STZ to discourage unnecessary car journeys in Cambridge. What evidence do ECDC have that congestion and related CO2 emissions generated by car journeys into and out of Cambridge can be effectively reduced without some kind of congestion and or ULEZ, ultra low emission zone charging scheme? The draft response repeatedly states concern about the impact of congestion charging on different user groups without providing evidence to show that these impacts would actually, what these impacts should actually be. The STZ proposals include an extensive exemptions list of users, including, among others, delivery businesses, blue badge holders and outpatients of Addenbrooke's Hospital. Given that the funding for the GCP plan is contingent on some element of congestion charging, would it not be more constructive for ECDC to suggest further additions to the exemptions list or modifications to the exact boundary of the STZ rather than derailing the entire plan? The draft response repeatedly asserts that the proposals are too ambitious or not realistic. What evidence does ECDC have to support these assertions? And does this signal that ECDC does not have real ambition to help cut transport emissions and congestion in Cambridgeshire? Transport is clearly a contentious issue locally. Would the District Council be willing to help organise a citizens' assembly involving East Cambs residents and transport experts to provide a constructive platform for guiding future transport proposals in light of the urgent need to tackle congestion, air pollution and climate change while ensuring a fair and just transition to net zero? Our group will be happy to work with ECDC alongside other community groups to help promote such an event. There is a local precedent for this, as a citizens' assembly helped formulate the initial proposals put forward by the GCP, and there is a link to a website on that. We would also like to invite councillors to attend our next Earth Cafe event in January, which will focus on active travel. This is likely to be on Thursday, the 19th of January, with details to be confirmed. Thank you in advance for your time.
Sorry. Ask members to take that into account during the debate. Thank you. That closes public question time, and as I said when we went live on the live stream, there were about 3 questions prior to us going live, but if you wish to look at those, please look at the live stream at your leisure when it's available. Item 2 is apologies for absence. Tracy.
Thank you, Chairman. We have apologies from councillors Austin, Stubbs and Trimarco.
And also Matt Downey.
Councillor Downey.
Okay, thank you. Declarations of interest. Are there any? Councillor Dupre and Councillor Whelan.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say, I'm a member of Cambridgeshire County Council. The County Council may be asked at some point in the future to take a decision on some of the matters in the papers for this evening's meeting. I've therefore sought legal advice about my participation in this evening's meeting, which is taking place while the matters on which I may be asked to vote in future on another authority are still subject to an ongoing statutory consultation. Having received and considered that legal advice, I will not be participating in or remaining present for the remainder of this evening's meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Dupre. Councillor Alison Whelan.
I have also received the same legal advice, and for exactly the same reasons, I will also be absenting myself from the remainder of this meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Whelan. Any other declarations of interest? No, thank you. Okay, thank you. Chairman's announcements. I've only got one announcement, is that this evening we are using the red, green and amber clock that planning is used at planning committees. So it's sat there on that table. So that will give members an indication when they get to near the 5 minutes and when their 5 minutes is up. Thank you. That's all I've got to say. So I move over to item 5, which is the council's response to. I've done that. Yes. Council's response to Greater Cambridge Partnership Making Connections consultation, and Sally Bonnet is going to introduce the paper. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. Appendix 1 of this report sets out the council's proposed submission to the Greater Cambridge Partnership GCP Making Connections consultation. Whilst the council supports the principles of improving bus services and walking and cycling infrastructure and acknowledges the benefits of these, it has concerns regarding the delivery of the proposed future bus network and its long-term sustainability, in particular the proposals and resources allocated for the demand responsive transport DRT in rural areas. In addition to the points raised during public question time, additional information from the GCP has been circulated to members. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally. I now move to the recommendation, which is on Appendix 1. So do I have a proposer for that recommendation?
Happy to propose.
Councillor Bailey. And do we have a seconder?
Happy to second, Chairman. I reserve my right. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kane.
I would like to move an amendment in due course.
Okay, thank you. So Councillor Bailey, if you can introduce the paper, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. And I'm aware that at least some Liberal Democrat colleagues are opposed to these proposals. I really hope we can speak with a united voice from East Cambs on behalf of our residents. Of course, we welcome improvements to public and sustainable forms of transport, and it reflects work of the council where we've worked to achieve much in this arena with rail improvements, our bus service proposals, our cycling and walking route strategy, where we've actually put money into feasibility studies and delivery of one cycle route recently. But we also recognise that not everyone can use public and active travel. Many people need to make regular complex journeys. Cambridgeshire is a rare net contributor to the Treasury. Greater Cambridge is a world-leading centre for high tech and innovation. And what's on offer from the GCP feels like an out-of-date 20th century solution for our 21st century county town. And it is just not good enough. The frequency of the rural services and the key corridor bus services, to me, is inadequate. Under these proposals, users would spend considerably more time travelling, which means lost productivity and reduced quality of life. The demand responsive transport proposals for 12 buses across the county in 9 zones are underdeveloped, simply don't add up. A zone that has 2 buses to serve rural villages to get to locations covering a geography of Cottenham, Willingham, Newmarket and Chatterish just does not stack up. A half-hour pickup performance standard isn't achievable in this model. The service doesn't propose door-to-door pickup, meaning people in remote locations are unlikely to be able to benefit from the DRT. This really hits the least well off the most. Those that can work from home, who tend to be better off, relatively speaking, won't suffer so much. But what about those that work in manual, retail, frontline or face-to-face roles, often with unsociable hours? It is unfair. People lead complex lives and they undertake complex travel on a regular basis. They juggle work, children, caring duties. It's just life. But these are our residents and we should be trying to make their lives better. And I do not think that these proposals achieve that. Rural residents are penalised. Virtually nothing on offer for Fenland, which requires levelling up. The business impact work is virtually non-existent. I've looked at Appendix D following the GCP letter. Tradespeople are facing charges of £10 a day, HGVs £50 a day. Those living in the zone, what about personal freedoms? How would we like it if every time we needed to move our car, we have to pay £5? Inclusion of Addenbrooke's and Papworth hospitals, labelled as immoral. There is public outrage about this element. Consultation in East Cambs has been utterly inadequate. There was one event in a back room in Ely Library. I went to it. It was attended by about 15 people for the 3 hours that I was there. There's been no leaflet dropped to our residents. And I'm still coming across people all the time that just don't know about these proposals. Of course, we need a solution that provides cheap, attractive, turn up and go travel. That was on offer with the Cam Metro. It was a serious project that had attracted a serious staff team, including Lord Robert Mayor, a renowned underground construction expert, and it was deliverable. The leader of the county council, Councillor Lucy Netzinger, has now acquiesced that perhaps tunnelling was the answer after all. The Cam Metro could be resurrected, or some form of it, maybe like rail. We should unite and demand something better, something more transformational, something that is so attractive, people want to use it rather than having to be punished into doing so. The GCP doesn't have the trust of the people. It comes across as arrogant and remote. It has spent £100 million and 8.5 years talking about stuff, doing virtually nothing. Get on with doing the small things, cycling infrastructure in the city and beyond, fill the potholes, get the greenways built, invest in rural routes to onward transport locations, make it easier for people to cycle park journeys, provide plentiful, safe, secure cycle parking, expedite the conversation with bus providers for an enhanced bus partnership, get the current system working to provide a decent integrated network with a focus on rural areas for public subsidy, give it certainty, longevity, make it reliable, look for routes like the Ely Zipper that can become close to self-sustaining, look to take out the necessity to change buses wherever possible, deliver services that people actually want, not buses at 1 AM in rural locations, get on with the rail improvements, support solutions that enable people to live near to where they work, then get on with a proper 21st century solution. It's absolutely clear that the public doesn't support this. There's no political mandate. And if the county council believes it has the public support to impose the congestion charge, then let it ask the people. And finally, Chairman, the price of the GCP proposals is too great for the price that's on offer. For me, it's akin to that ubiquitous Christmas raffle prize. It's that one that's left on the table until last. And when you turn it over, you see several previous raffle tickets stuck to the bottom. You notice it has gone past its sell-by date. And when you pick it up, the shiny box falls apart and it smashes to the ground. The GCP, and more importantly, the combined authority, needs to do better. We can and we must do better.
Thank you, Councillor Bailey. I just wanted to mention one, and I'll come to Councillor Kane, that you did refer to in your speeches. Again, all members should have received a letter from Lynn Miles, the Director of City Access at the Greater Cambridge Partnership, which obviously you can take account of during the debate. But yes, Councillor Kane, now, your amendment.
Yes, I'd like to move an amendment. I've got a paper copy of it here, and I've also provided an electronic copy. Do you want me to read the amendment now?
I haven't seen it. Would you like, could we make copies?
Yeah, I think.
Okay.
If you want,
Please,
yeah.
if you don't mind, thank you. Yeah.
I think if we can adjourn for a couple of minutes to make copies. Or
Yeah, we can just hear it.
yeah, look, I'm conscious of time. What a suggestive. Tracy can make copies, and then whilst Councillor Kane is introducing her amendment, it's probably the most expedient thing. If you're happy to do that. Yeah.
Can I read it out?
Yes, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
We will make copies.
Okay, so it's effectively crossing out agree in the recommendation and saying members are requested to instruct officers to amend the draft submission to the GCP attached as Appendix 1 to this report to reflect, 1, that this council has declared a climate emergency and that in the year to March 2022, carbon emissions from transport in Cambridgeshire were 1,597.5 million tonnes, 23% of the total carbon emissions in the county, and cars and taxis contribute over half of the greenhouse gas emissions from domestic transport. 2, the need to provide car drivers with attractive public transport alternatives. 3, that many residents cannot drive and need public transport to access employment, services, and leisure activities. 4, the significant congestion within Cambridge and on the routes into Cambridge, including the A10 and the B1102, A1303. 5, the urgent need for significant improvements to buses, given their continual decline since 1986 and the recent sudden acceleration of the decline. 6, support for well-resourced demand responsive transport from door to a scheduled bus or train service and back, but increasing the hours needed to meet the scheduled buses. 7, support for extended hours and increased frequency for public transport provision. 8, support for the extra routes from park and ride sites, for example, direct buses to Addenbrooks and railway stations. 9, the need for rail improvements and fare reductions and integration of various modes of public transport. 10, provision of plus bus tickets, allowing travellers to pay a small supplement on their train fare to cover buses from home to train and from train to Cambridgeshire destination and back. 11, provision of travel hubs along rural bus routes and key bus corridors. 12, provision for school student tickets, ensuring that rural school students pay no more than Cambridge school students for travel to school or sixth form college. And 13, the funding challenges. Given that there are indications that some combined authority board members oppose funding through a mayoral precept, and the government refused the combined authority's recent bus improvement funding bid on the grounds of lack of commitment to road pricing, active travel and bus priority schemes, and Cambridge's high overall growth. So I move that amendment, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, councillor Bailey. Do you have a seconder?
I second and reserve my right.
Okay, thank you.
Discussion on the amendment.
Yeah, so we now move to this. Obviously, I realise members have not got this in front of them yet, but I move to. I'll delay it for about 30 seconds because Tracy's just arrived with the copies. I realise members have just seen this, but obviously I'll move to the debate now. Do I have any speakers? Councillor Josh Schumann. Sorry.
No, you've just done that.
I thought, oh, no, apologies. Yes, you're totally correct, Councillor Kane. Sorry. Yes, apologies. Yeah, please, Councillor Kane, yes.
Thank you, Chair. Too many of our residents struggle to travel to work, to GPs, to hospitals, cinemas, sports centres, and many other services and leisure activities. Whether it's the car commuters stuck in endless traffic jams at the entrance to Cambridge, students paying over £1,000 a year to get to college and then often being late or left stranded in their villages when the bus doesn't come, or the elderly unable to visit their husband's memorial bench because there's no longer a bus. The residents along our major roads suffer the noise and air pollution, fear to let children cross the road to school or to play, and can't enjoy sitting in their garden because the sounds of nature are drowned out by the traffic. As we build more houses, the amount of traffic will increase and these problems will get worse. Nobody thinks this is sustainable. And we all know it's making the climate emergency worse and will leave our children to cope with dangerously hot summers, drought, and the risk of flooding from sudden heavy rain. So this amendment makes the need to address the climate emergency explicit in our response. Making Connections suggests solutions to these problems by providing a public transport network which will connect all our residents to Ely, Cambridge, Newmarket, the rail stations and our villages. Residents have told us that the proposals do not go far enough, so this amendment seeks to add further improvements, such as transport hubs on the main bus routes and plus bus. We also ask for student tickets so young people pay no more to get to school or college than Cambridge residents. The amendment also unequivocally supports the proposed improvements. Buses 7 days a week from 5 AM to 1 AM. For some routes, 2 buses an hour, for other routes an hourly service. Transport on demand for those residents not on a bus route. I cannot understand why the Conservatives want less. I think our residents deserve good quality public transport, but the Tories think that these services do not represent best use of public funds. We also support more park and ride parking spaces and buses covering a choice of routes so that you can go into the city centre or direct to Addenbrooke's or the railway station. Residents have also raised concerns about road charging for those who
Councillor
drive.
Kane, sorry, I've got Councillor Trapp.
Point of order, I'm sorry, I'm having a difficulty in listening sometimes because other people are speaking.
Okay, yes, the members can be quiet while Councillor Kane's speaking. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Trapp.
Residents have also raised concerns about road charging for those who drive into Cambridge, and we're not convinced that the GCP has got that right. The proposed charging zone is very large and includes Cambridge North Station, as well as Addenbrooke's and the Rosie. We understand that this is proposed partly to fund the public transport improvements and partly to reduce congestion. But we're not convinced, and our amendment therefore asks that the funding challenges are considered more widely. Although we note that the government has refused funding to Cambridgeshire on the grounds of lack of commitment to road pricing, active travel and bus priority schemes. And that there are indications that some combined authority board members oppose funding through a mayoral precept. So it is a challenge to find that funding. Making connections does need to be further improved and sustainable funding needs to be identified, but it's a significant improvement on the current position. It's only a few months since we nearly lost several bus services across East Cambs, and their funding into next year and beyond is still uncertain. This amendment ensures that our response welcomes the proposed improvements, asks for further improvements, and that the GCP should work with the County Council and Combined Authority to find sustainable ways to fund these vital services. I move this amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Kane. Members, I've got Councillor Josh Human who wants to speak on. The seconder has reserved that Councillor Inskip is reserved his right to speak. Yes.
Thank you, Chairman. In short, it would be nice to be able to support this amendment, but quite frankly, I feel like I've walked into a different meeting, and I'm sure Councillor Kane must feel the same. This is not a meeting to discuss fanciful ideas and concepts. That's perhaps where you should be going to the Combined Authority to bring in some of these proposals and they can consider them. We've been asked to respond to a consultation which the Combined Authority have presented to us. This is nothing more than the first half of these points are points which, quite frankly, I agree with the majority of them, but nothing to do with the consultation or the consultation response, and would be inappropriate to include it. The other half are statements which have come up with some fairly sensible ideas. Again, I'd agree with a number of them, but without any substance, without any detail, without any idea how they'll be costed, worked up, or how they'd be delivered. So we couldn't support a response which, quite frankly, has no substance or detail behind it. I don't understand why Councillor Kane or anybody thinks it's appropriate to bring this at the 11th hour and have any of our members understand the consequences of it. If you were serious about any of these points, then present them to the council in the way that we present considerations to council or amendments, and we can look at them and potentially include them in some way in our response. However, I'd like to end on a positive note to say that Councillor Kane's statement and these additional points suggest that you agree with us in our response to the consultation in saying this does not go nearly far enough, it's not workable, and it won't deliver the solutions which we hope it will. So therefore, Chairman, we can't support this amendment, and well, I certainly couldn't support this amendment, and would hope that Councillor Kane would be presenting this kind of statement to the Combined Authority where her colleagues might listen to her. Sorry, the GCP. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Josh Human. I've got Councillor Hunt now.
Thank you, Chair. I must say that Councillor Schumann has taken a lot of the comments that I was going to make. I've been a councillor for 18 years, and I've never been presented with an amendment at 6:27 when the meeting started at 5:30. I think it shows contempt for the matter we are discussing. I think it shows contempt for the council as a whole. We've got a load of people here, and if anybody could consider this major item, which is important enough to have a special meeting, and then to come in with an amendment, which, as Councillor Schumann says, I would like to read it, I'd like to understand it, I'd like to see if there was some merit as far as I saw in it. I can't. It's been chucked on in front of me. nearly an hour after the meeting was due to start. Therefore, I cannot consider it properly, and I don't think you do your case any good. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt. Councillor, was that you? Yeah, Councillor Goldsack, you're signifying you want to speak? Yes,
Please. Thank you. Just a couple of points. I'm not going to go over what Councillors Schumann and Hunt have said. 2 points of clarification, really. You know, there's a lot in here I agree with, no doubt about it. But point one, you haven't even put the source down for your figures. You know, there's a million things out there that I can read books, I can go Google, but you know, you're making some big statements there. You really should qualify them with a source for your figures, which tells me maybe there's a little bit more on this. The second point is, what's a travel hub? I don't know what a travel hub is. I have an idea in my head, but I don't know what a travel hub is. Yet you're asking for the provision of travel hubs along rural bus routes. I live in a very rural community. It might help me to vote on the matter if I knew what a travel hub was. So I'm afraid I do think this is a little bit late, whilst I'll say well conceived and actually got some good ideas, but this is not what we're debating now. Unfortunately, I can't support the amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Goldsack. I've got Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chairman. I am utterly amazed at the attitude of the councillors opposite. Perhaps it's because they haven't actually applied themselves to actually going into the consultation online and going through the questions and looking at them. If you've done that, you will see that a lot of the things that are in here are in fact points that are made in the consultation and in the notes attached to the consultation that has been made already by the Greater Cambridge Partnership. And the point is, what we're suggesting is not that all these things are our policy, because obviously, as Councillor Bailey has pointed out at least 3 times, we are not the Transport Authority. What we're actually asking is that the GCP, they actually look at these things and add these things to their other items. Some of the items they're in there, we're saying, yeah, fair enough. One of the things that we're asked to support the appendix suggests that we're not supporting, for example, the extended hours that are in the proposal because it would be a good use of public funds. Well, it isn't our public funds that we're talking about. We are asking for what East Cambridgeshire would like to see. And we would like to see a proper system so that people in East Cambridgeshire actually can, in fact, enjoy good transport. One of the things that when I was working in Cambridge, I found that I could not use the public transport. Not because I couldn't get into Cambridge, it's because I couldn't get home because the buses finished too late, too soon. And I was travelling after about 7 o'clock from work and there weren't any buses at all. I couldn't walk from Cambridge to Haddenham because I'm not fit enough to do that. And so an extended number of hours is well worth it. And it means that if you extend the number of hours, people will be able to use the other transport in the time. You'll end up with more people using the buses altogether because they'll be able to use it and go back again. Once you've given a good service, people will start using it. And in fact, you might well find that the fares, although reduced, will actually pay for the cost of these things. We don't know that we'll need a great big subsidy at the end. I certainly don't like the idea that after 5 years of doing it, and of course, this, if you look at it carefully, it is only in the 5th year that this congestion charging of £5 actually comes about. And of course, before that happens, there'll be 2 lots of elections for local authorities. So it will be quite clear that it may not happen like that. There'll also be at least 1, if not 2 general elections. So the government might have changed their mind about properly funding Cambridge's transport, which they should be doing. And we might find that we don't need this thing, but the concept is the first charges don't happen for about 3 years anyway, and only apply for the period in the rush hour, 7 o'clock till 10 o'clock in the morning. So if people had actually gone through the questions, answered them the way they thought, and added their comments, they would have found that a lot of these things would actually already be there. So if you're supporting these things, all we're asking is that they should be considered you know, that we're asking that they should reflect on these things. We're not saying that we would immediately have all these things on there. So if you think that these contain some good ideas, vote for this amendment and say to the officers, well, let's put this sort of stuff, throw it back to the GCP, make them do some work on it, make them do the figures on it, because we're not the Transport Authority. Make them do some work by pointing out to them that East Cambs wants better services for our own residents. And we are not in the position of saying, well, we're happy to let Cambridge have a wonderful system when we don't care. We do care. We want proper services for our villages. How can the people in Coveney say that they got a bus service which happens on Thursdays? It's ridiculous. And even in Haddenham, where we've now got the nice Ely Zipper bus, it's still not very possible to use it in the evening. You know, there are lots of things that we need. And in East Cambridgeshire, we need them. And we should be telling the GCP, this is what East Cambridgeshire wants. We shouldn't be saying, oh, well, we don't like it. We don't like the congestion charge. You know, therefore, we'll throw the whole thing out. Baby with the bathwater. It would be a very, very foolish thing to do. Let's ask for additional items. If we think any of these items are good, let's put them in and throw them back to the GCP and say, get on with it. Provide the services and provide the service that East Cambridgeshire people need to run and not have to use their car every single day. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. I've got Councillor Trapp next.
Thank you very much. I thought these were very positive and constructive amendments, and very much in line with many of the public speakers who came today or this evening. I won't need this green light. Councillor Schumann dismissed this as mere assertions. Well, I think they're more so than those negative ones that are in the appendix, which is still in draft form, apparently. So I think that we actually ought to be looking at this, because these are actually encouraging public transport, which we should be having. And perhaps later in the speech, I will not in the speech, but latest motion, I will talk about my own experiences of commuting into Cambridge. But at the moment, these are, I think, are very positive and very constructive, as opposed to what I feel is in the appendix. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Trapp. I've got Councillor Harries next.
Very briefly for once. When we read the draft response, our view was that it was unambitious and also a little pessimistic. There was a lot of information, one of which Councillor Wilson pointed out, where we appear to be censoring ourselves, saying we just don't believe this is sustainable. And I understand that. I'm not criticizing the fact that it was written in that way, but we feel it's necessary to respond in a more ambitious way, because again, echoing what others have said, it's not actually our problem. Because we're not the Transport Authority, it's not our problem to produce viable proposals. It's our duty to ask and to specify what those viable proposals actually would be. So, for example, it is of limited value to point out that the duration of services is too short, true though it definitely is. It is of greater value to state that we want those services to be extended over longer hours and to state why. So what we would really like to do, and this amendment contains useful and positive suggestions that we would very much encourage officers to take up and to include in the response, but the real requirement is to try to change the entire tone of the response, so that we are playing our proper part, which is as a responsible authority responding to the consultation with our wish list of the things that would change the lives of our residents for the better. And we thought these proposals were frankly a bit weak in that respect. And I know that we're going to debate this much more when we get onto the substantive motion, but the real reason is essentially political. We're setting up the GCP's consultation to fail if possible, instead of doing an honest job of telling them what we want. Now, we may consider that it's a big ask in some respects, but it's not our job to censor ourselves. It's up to the responsible authority to come back to us and explain if we can't have these services. And if not, why not? And to show us the working, show us the costing, and let us have a proper debate about that. And that's why we just would like to see a more ambitious response from this council in order to do the right thing for our residents, which is to demand the services that they deserve rather than assume it's not possible to get them. So there's just that one little thing that we think the council should be doing differently. And I would ask you just to think about that a little and consider if we could perhaps incorporate some of these suggestions in our responses. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harries. I'm seeing no more speakers, so I move to the seconder of the amendment. Also,
Councillor Christine.
oh, sorry, I didn't see you there, Councillor Christine Amber.
Thank you. Irrespective of the merits of the suggestions in this document, of which several of my colleagues have, recognised the merit, why has it suddenly been pulled like a rabbit out of the hat an hour after the meeting started? This should have appeared in our inboxes several days ago, surely. So at least we could have had a chance to discuss and consider some of the merits of some of these. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Christine Ambrose Smith. I'm now seeing no more speakers. No, so which case I move to Councillor Inskip as the seconder of the amendment.
Thank you, Chair. We'd be happy from this side to have a small adjournment if the group on the other side need a little more time to reflect on the amendment and decide whether you want to support it or not. I think that would be better than as sounds like you're going to reject it out of hand. So do dwell on that whilst I do just second the amendment. And I want to start by reminding us that it was in this council chamber in October 2019 that we made the decision to declare a climate emergency, a very significant decision, acknowledging the huge threat that we face if we don't address climate change. The council agreed, and I quote, that we'll explore and consider measures required and the feasibility of reaching net zero carbon emissions by the council by 2050. We instigated an annual environment plan, the latest edition of which states our greenhouse gas emissions in Cambridgeshire are considerably higher than the national average on a per capita basis, with particularly high emissions against national averages in transport. We need a strong focus on transport when it comes to our climate emergency commitment, seeking to reduce the number of car journeys. At a local level, we can and do and encourage active travel, but a key component of any plan has to be to provide attractive public transport alternatives. And that's a key element of the Making Connections proposals, not just within the greater Cambridge area, but as we've already heard, crucially, a massive improvement of bus services in East Cambridgeshire. Bus services have been in decline for nearly 40 years. It's a long time ago, but I remember as a student, bus deregulation coming in. I didn't have a car at the time. I saw the damage that did, and I actually served on a council that for a while still owned a bus company, a rarity, but I saw the damage that bus deregulation did. By the time I moved to Sutton in 2010, there was just an hourly service Monday to Friday to Cambridge via Ely, but that stopped after 7 p.m. in the evening, and there was no service on a Sunday. But fast forward to today, that service has been reduced to 2 hourly. It only goes to Ely. If you want to go into Cambridge, you either have to change buses, or if you want to get to the station, you have to walk 1,100 metres or wait for another bus. And it stops just after 5:30 in the evening. Oh, and there's still no service on a Sunday. That's the reality that our residents face today. And the impact is clear. The latest census figures released just last month show that in my ward, car ownership has risen to 97% of households. More and more people being forced to rely on a car because there is no alternative. But not everyone can drive. Young people who haven't yet learned or can't afford a car, some of those with disabilities, and significant numbers of elderly residents. The Making Connections proposals would restore that hourly service, but not just that. They would add the direct link to the railway station. Services would start earlier and extend into the evening, and it would restore a Sunday service. But do we as a district council in the draft consultation welcome that? No, we don't. At least not in the draft response. It states the proposed operating hours for both key bus corridor services, rural services and DRT services do not represent best use of funds. A clear call to the GCP that when it comes to East Cambridgeshire, we don't want them to invest in public transport. What a wrong-headed message to give to this consultation. Now, there is more that needs, now more than ever, more needs to be done. As a rural district with commuters, rail also has a key part to play. Prior to 2010, I lived in a district that opened 2 railway stations, one brand new, one replacing one under the Beeching Cuts. Now, you'll at that point say, oh, well, look at Soham Station. But those 2 stations I'm referring to had a crucial difference. They had regular train services that took people to destinations where travellers wanted to go. And if you look at the footfall at those stations, it was massively higher than Soham. But the appetite to use trains where there's a decent service is clear. You only have to turn up to Ely Station in the morning and early rush hours. It's actually equally true of Newmarket. Trains running there often so full by the time they get to our district in Dullingham that our residents can't board because the trains are full. And yet we have a national government that seems intent on delivering one of the most expensive rail services in Europe and failing to deliver the rail infrastructure improvements that we need locally in a timely way. Now, yes, there are funding challenges, as the amendment acknowledges, and it's going to be absolutely essential for the GCP, together with the County Council and the Combined Authority, to identify solutions which are fair and equitable.
Councillor Inskip.
I'll just wrap up my remarks, but whilst they wrestle with that challenge, we should wholeheartedly support their efforts to bring massive improvements to bus services in East Cambridgeshire, and we should be demanding more from the government at the same time.
Thank you, Councillor Inskip. I now move to Councillor Bailey as the proposer of the original motion to
thank
sum up.
you. Until Councillor Inskip got up, I actually thought we weren't a million miles apart. But that unfortunately, my view on that seems to have gone downhill a little bit since Councillor Inskip spoke. Obviously, he's very passionate on the subject. And I truly don't think we are a million miles apart. This list, you know, I can't particularly pick on, there's a couple of errors in it, like item 6, for example, talks about, well, obviously we could say we support a well-resourced, demand-responsive transport from door to scheduled bus or train service. That's not actually what the proposal is. I've since had clarification that the proposal is not a door-to-door service. It's from various pickup points, more like the Ting service in West Huntingdonshire, which does disenfranchise many people in the more rural locations. Like, you're not going to walk down Second Drove in Little Downham to get to a DRT pickup point. So there are some you could call them inaccuracies, or I don't know. The thing about the last point about the statement about government refused the Combined Authority's recent bus improvement on the grounds of lack of commitment to road pricing. As I alluded to earlier, I have addressed this with senior officers, the head of transport at the Combined Authority, who absolutely does not know where that statement comes from. The jury's still out. Maybe he will find where the statements come from, but there is no source for that statement currently. It appears in an Overview and Scrutiny Committee report, so there's no harm in referring to it, but we don't know where it comes from. Councillor Wilson, there are many hundreds of pages of consultation material. I have no idea whether this list, you know, I can't remember all of the consultation materials. I have looked at them. My colleagues have looked at them. Many of my colleagues have submitted responses. So we are putting in the work. But, you know, how can I know that that first statement is accurate being presented with this? And then being barred from even talking to my colleagues about it because we're in the middle of a meeting. It is such a shame that this didn't come to us in advance, because, as I say, I honestly don't think we're a million miles apart. What I'm unclear about now, though, is whether, if we were to absorb these amendments, quite how we would do that. It would require a delegation to officers, presumably in consultation with the leader, to come up with the final draft that we submit. And until Councillor Inskip spoke, that seemed like a reasonable potential approach. But then Councillor Inskip started objecting to certain paragraphs that are in the draft response that he doesn't want to see in there. So I don't know which paragraphs our colleagues opposite are objecting to and would want to see removed, because that is not clear, because they haven't done any striking out of the draft response. So I don't know what things, you know, Councillor Inskip alluded to one item that he wouldn't want to see in there. So I feel we're in an impossible situation where with some small tweaks, I really think a lot of this could be absorbed. And of course, this meeting is on public record. I'm absolutely certain that the GCP is watching this. I know they watched the Huntingdonshire cabinet discussions the other day. They will have heard everything that we've all said, and they will take all of this into consideration. And, you know, so it is there on the record, but I find it very problematic in this forum now to try and integrate that into a document that Councillor Inskip says he has problems with. For example, if we were to absorb all of this, I have no idea whether members opposite would still support the statements that we are against congestion charging that appear in the draft response. This side of the chamber is definitely against the congestion charging in the context of these proposals as they stand as a whole. And that is what our draft response says, but I have no idea whether that is something that you're looking to have struck out, because you haven't told us. All you've done is provided a list of very positive and supportive information that we want to get across to the GCP, and I think that's being done because it is on the public record. I have, you know, given that they've not struck out any material from Appendix 1, I'm sincerely hoping that our colleagues opposite will support Appendix 1, because you haven't struck out any material from it, and your material is on the public record. It's very hard to integrate that material now. So I really hope, you know, and if we had it in advance, you know, we would have genuinely, openly looked to see if we could have get it included. But I don't think that members opposite would be happy for a delegation to the leader and an officer to come up with the final draft response that we've all signed up to in advance of having seen it. It's just unworkable. I'm really sorry, because I think we could have got somewhere with this if we'd had time with it.
Thank you, Councillor Bailey. Yes, Councillor Jones.
You mentioned you were opposed to it in this particular consultation, but it doesn't actually just say the draft just reads on the last paragraph against congestion charging. Is it something you feel that you could amend to say congestion charging for the scheme proposed, as you suggested?
It's quite slightly out of norm, but in the interest of trying
Chairman,
to debate,
is Councillor Jones suggesting an amendment from the Liberal Democrat group? That is, it's not for me to amend. It is, if you're not happy with this response, Chairman, I think the members opposite should suggest amendments. Yeah, in due process.
Yeah. Councillor Harries, I'm conscious we need to, if it's points of clarification. Okay.
In Appendix 1, there is reference made, I think twice, to the vote taken earlier this year. That vote was taken before the GCP proposals were seen. So what Councillor Bailey has just said is interesting and I think positive, saying that we are opposed to congestion charging in the context of these proposals. But at the same time, what Appendix 1 actually says is he refers us back to the earlier vote, which was just we are opposed to congestion charging, full stop. The problem that I think we had with that is that it makes congestion charging a matter of absolute principle, whereas we see it as a tool, which is sometimes useful, sometimes not appropriate. If you are changing your position, that would be interesting, reasonable, and would probably be greeted with a certain amount of positivity, certainly from some of us.
I'm happy to respond, Chair, if you want me to.
Briefly, yes, I'm conscious this is out of the norm here, but
I mean,
are we looking at a new amendment here?
I don't know.
Let's deal with this amendment and then, yeah.
The point's been made again.
Yeah, members, we're voting on the amendment which you've got circulated on the sheet submitted by Councillor Kane. Can I have a show of hands for those who are in favour of the amendment, please?
Could we have a recorded vote, please, Chair? Sorry, I've had my hand up.
Okay, is that in time, Tracy? Yes. Yeah. Okay.
Sorry.
Which case, members, when Tracy reads your name out, if you can say if you're for or against or abstaining on the amendment. Please.
That's right. Okay. Councillor Christine Ambrose Smith.
Against.
Councillor David Ambrose Smith. Councillor Anna Bailey.
Against.
Councillor Ian Bovingdon.
Against.
Councillor David Brown.
Against.
Councillor Charlotte Kane.
For.
Councillor, let me just go down, Lavinia Edwards. Councillor Liz Every. Councillor Mark Goldsack. Councillor Simon Harries. Councillor Julia Huffer.
Against.
Councillor Bill Hunt. Councillor Mark Inskip.
For.
Councillor Alec Jones.
For.
Councillor Daniel Schumann.
Against.
Councillor Joshua Schumann.
Against.
Councillor Alan Sharp.
Against.
Councillor Amy Starkey.
Against.
Councillor John Trapp.
For.
Councillor Joe Webber. Councillor Christine Whelan.
For.
Councillor Gareth Wilson.
For.
So the motion is lost by 15 votes in favour, sorry, 7 votes in favour to 15 votes against amendment.
Okay, thank you, Tracy. We now move back to the debate. I'm conscious of what's being said, but at the moment, all we've got on the table is the Councillor Bailey has proposed it. Councillor Josh Schumann has reserved his right to speak. So do I have any speakers on the main debate?
Councillor Kane.
Councillor Kane.
Thank you, Chair. This motion as it stands reflects the Conservatives' public stance from MPs through to district councillors. Instead of engaging with residents in the debate and encouraging residents to respond to the consultation, Conservatives have just broadcast through all media that they oppose congestion charging and distracted residents from engaging with the consultation by launching a Conservative petition against the congestion charge. This is rank hypocrisy from the MPs because their government refused Cambridge's public transport funding bid, partly because there was a lack of commitment to road pricing. Councillor Bailey asks where this information comes from. Well, it comes from a statement from Councillor Anne Hay, who's the Conservative councillor for Chatteris. And they're letting all local residents down by reducing this important debate about the future of local transport to one issue. Lib Dem councillors, on the other hand, are encouraging residents to engage fully in the consultation and have been discussing the proposals with local residents and listening to the views of local residents. We've heard that the GCP hasn't consulted in the area. I've found that they've been very open to coming to talk to people when offered the opportunity. For example, they've talked with all the parish councils in East Cambridgeshire. They're going to be meeting with the A to B 1102 group to discuss the proposals. And I understand that they were refused permission to leaflet in our market square. So it's a bit rich to complain they haven't consulted locally.
Point of order, Chair, please.
Yes, Councillor Goldsack.
I wasn't going to say anything, but there's 2 things that have been said there that are actually factually incorrect, right? They have not been out to every parish council in East Cambridgeshire. Fact. It's not been out. You've just
Is
said
this
that they
a point
have
of
and they've not
order?
been out. The second
Let's not
thing
have
is,
this
okay,
before,
the second thing is, I object to being grouped, okay, into a collective noun and then told that that's what the collective noun does. It's the wrong thing to do. I have invited David Bagent out to Seoul
Not really,
to
yeah,
express.
okay, thank you. It's not
It's
really a
wrong.
point of order, Councillor Goldsack, please.
I didn't say they'd gone out to every parish council. I said they'd met with parish councils. It was a meeting that all parish councils were invited to. So, this proposed response complains the proposals are not good enough, but it makes no suggestions for the improvements which our residents want. Worse even than that, it states that the proposed improvements to our bus services, quote, do not represent best use of public funds. That's on page 4, paragraph 7. This council is concerned that the proposed operating hours for both key bus corridor services, rural services and DRT services do not represent best use of public funds and are unsustainable. What better use of public funds can there be than to address the climate emergency and ensure all residents can travel around our district and into Ely, Cambridge and Newmarket, allowing young people to get to the schools and colleges of their choice, take up work experience and enjoy nights out in Cambridge and Newmarket, allowing elderly people to get to coffee mornings, visit friends, visit local sites, allowing young parents to take their children to nursery, the swimming pool or the GP. In one-car families, the main carer is often isolated in their village, allowing many of us to travel by bus rather than use our cars and add to pollution and congestion, allowing the people who live along the major routes to get back the peace and quiet which they remember and they deserve. I think that's a far better use of public funds than subsidising roads, oil companies, and even Boris Johnson's Partygate legal fees, all of which the Conservatives gladly fund. It rejects fully any congestion charging without waiting for the public response to the consultation, without seeing whether the better public transport reduces congestion sufficiently to improve air quality, and without suggesting any other means of funding. I'm not convinced that congestion charging is needed, and I do think the proposed charging zone is too large, but to rule it out completely under any circumstances seems foolish. It's a pity this response didn't follow our usual process of consideration by the Bus, Cycle and Walk Working Group, who could have improved the draft considerably before it was presented to members. It is, as members opposite have said, virtually impossible to redraft a paper at the council meeting, but it was the chair who chose to do it in this way, not us. I don't understand why it didn't go through the working group. That's how we've done these sorts of consultations in the past. Nevertheless, we tried to improve the draft response with our amendment. The Conservatives refused that amendment, despite saying they agreed with most of it. And so we have a draft which misses the opportunity to deliver better public transport for East Cambs residents.
Thank you, Councillor Kane. I've got Councillor Harries.
Those of you who follow me on social media, and I know for some reason one or two of you do, will know that I've been very publicly opposed to many aspects of the GCP's plan. I have in fact disagreed with the constitution of the GCP, have wondered at its legitimacy, and have found to my great surprise that after 39 years of living actually in the city of Cambridge, where I cursed congestion every day and puffed on my asthma inhalers and cursed the air pollution, particularly because 2 of my children have severe asthma as a result. But moving to East Cambridgeshire has obviously made me see this in a different way. I understand that our duty is to do the best for our residents, and therefore we have to be as robust as possible in feeding back to the GCP through this statutory consultation. And let's face it, it is just a consultation right now. This is us giving them ideas, but we need to be as ambitious as we can. I note that we've heard several times the phrase, we don't need or words to the effect of, we don't need a 20th century solution for a 21st century problem. I absolutely agree with that. In fact, I believe it was a couple of people in our group who used it first publicly, but That's absolutely right. It's right that we should all be thinking like this. Now, I don't like road charging, but the reality is that the 21st century solution is going to be road charging. It's going to be weaning people off a fixation with and dependence on the private car, because we can't afford it any longer. This will come, which is why I refuse to see congestion charging as a matter of principle that we must always oppose, and instead see it as a potentially useful tool that can be deployed as long as the circumstances are right, as long as the proposals are right. We don't agree with the current STZ. We don't agree with the size and scale of that zone. We don't agree with many aspects of it. We don't agree with many aspects of the proposal. I would love personally to see a strategic mass transit system across the whole region, and would definitely be interested in inputting that in our response. The concern that we have with this response at the moment, and I know I'm repeating myself, is that it seems unambitious. And that's why I would also say that we obviously are at cross purposes in some way here. This document is marked draft. It's something that should be amended. It's something that should be openly discussed and then reconsidered. I personally would be very happy to see officers rethinking this. And there are one or two things that I would like to see changed. One being not referring to the blanket opposition to congestion charging. We don't like it. But as I keep saying, it's a tool, not a matter of principle. Let's say we oppose congestion charging in this form, in these circumstances, for this plan, and I would have no difficulty signing up for that. But reflecting what some of my colleagues have said, and also what some of you have all said, we need to be highly ambitious in speaking out for our residents. We need to feed into this consultation our demands, our requirements. Where the proposals are inadequate, we need to state that loud and clear and be absolutely resolute in doing so. It is not our problem or our place to argue about whether or not something is sustainable. They must find the funding for this. That's their job. But the final point, and just circling back one last time to congestion charging, it has to be paid for. Tools have got to be used for what they are, for what they will deliver. We will end up having to do this in one form or another. It's inevitable, if not now, in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time, if not through a local authority, it will be a central government policy. It is coming, and we know it's being discussed in government. There is no point in trying to make it a big political issue. It shouldn't be. It's part of the toolkit that we're all going to have to consider and potentially use. Thank you all of you.
Thank you, Councillor Harries. I'm seeing, Councillor Inskip and then Councillor Every. Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to make some brief comments. Hopefully I don't upset Councillor Bailey too much this time. But the key issue, and yeah, I do have some problems with the draft response, and it was those words that I quoted in my speech. In particular, the draft response says the proposed operating hours for both the key bus corridor services, rural services, and DLT services do not represent best use of public funds. The clear message that that's going to send to the GCP is the proposals you've got for extending and restoring those long forgotten Sunday services, which means that unless you've got a car on a Sunday, you're stranded in your village or town, or if you want to go to Cambridge in the evening, you either need to use a taxi or use your car. That's sending a clear message that we we in East Cambridgeshire, whatever they do in the rest of the GCP area, we don't want to see that. And I'm not at all happy with that. And Councillor Bailey took issue with the words in our amendment where we said we wanted to see well-resourced demand responsive transport from door to a scheduled bus or train service and back. The amendment was giving the feedback to the consultation of the sort of DRT service that we want to see, and we don't want to be shortchanged where we get that service, because that's the sort of service that we will need in those villages that are never going to be able to justify a scheduled bus service, and we really need to improve the situation there. So that's why I struggle with supporting the draft response that we have, and hopefully that just clarifies why I made those remarks earlier.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Inskip. I've got Councillor Every next.
Thank you, Chair. My goodness. Thank goodness we brought this debate to the chamber. I just wonder how the consultation might have ever understood how we felt in East Cambs through the normal channels of consultation that they had chosen to take. But now here we are talking about it openly together, which would not have happened if we hadn't gone down this route. I'm not going to talk about congestion charges in terms of the environment. I want to focus on the inequality and social exclusion that this move will bring to our rural areas outside Cambridge City. We need to consider this very carefully if we intend to reduce inequality, as we all say we want to. Social exclusion has been variously described, but simply it implies an inability to participate fully in the life of the community. Poverty, ill health, unemployment, physical isolation, lack of education, a lack of confidence often occur together and may be a particularly debilitating combination. It has long been recognised that lack of access to good transport can exacerbate or trigger social exclusion and results in people on low incomes, women, the elderly, and people with health problems can restrict their participation in society. Many of the most vulnerable people suffer from multiple deprivations, and loss of access to transport can be particularly serious for them. The introduction of congestion charge will immediately make it more difficult for some people to be able to drive and to get involved in those social activities, particularly those on low incomes, which is a necessity for us in the rural areas for some of us to drive. If the revenues are used to improve the transport system, to provide alternative modes of transport, or to provide alternative means of participating in the normal activities of society, this of course could immediately be offset what we're talking about. But we've been here before. The rhetoric of we will have good rural transport has been spoken about for years and years, as long as I can remember. And still we have no firm plans that will actually enable us to believe that this is likely to happen. Drivers faced with the new charge would have the option of paying it or making alternative arrangements. The following drivers are particularly at risk: disabilities who've got access problems, elderly people. Yes, of course, I can understand that the young jump on a bus, but there are a lot of people who can't jump on a bus and jump off a bus. And those who've got fears of getting on a bus, have got fears of potential security. Those kinds of issues are important. The serious impact of the congestion charge might also differ depending on the individual's journey's purpose. Trips for work, education, are young people wanting to take apprenticeships. But it also means that passengers have to rely on lifts for other people, and that's not always possible. How will we fund the congestion charge that will be added to the cost of our local car share service that ferries our elderly and infirm residents regularly to Yandles? Last year, our 30 volunteer drivers did 2,704 journeys. How can the residents of Cambridge benefit from this tax on our residents needing hospital care and a treatment? So who will answer these questions? If they were really serious about a consultation process, why was it so poorly marketed? This was an opportunity that they had to find out what we really wanted. But did they? Are they listening today? Well, perhaps being here today has forced them to do this. Why will only Cambridge residents benefit from the increased revenue? Who will invest in our local community car sharing schemes? Where is our community's car sharing? The lifeblood about getting our infirm to hospital appointments. There is no alternative if you cannot go on a train or you cannot go on a long bus journey and you can't afford a taxi. And it's impossible for many to do that. Where are the people going to go to work who can no longer afford to get into Cambridge, particularly those on low-paid jobs and shift work? How can this be a fair way to treat all our residents in Cambridgeshire, not just Cambridge City?
Thank you, councillor Every. I've got councillor Wilson next.
Thank you, Chairman. I really think that some of the people should actually have gone into the consultation and tried to answer it, because some of the points you've raised are actually there. You can actually say these people, and there's a whole list of people that are going to get zero charge anyway, and including some of the people you mentioned, Councillor Every. But and it says, do you think there are some extra people that ought to be given zero charge? And and do you think that the hours are right? And there's all sorts of questions that we should be answering. We haven't mentioned that at all in this appendix. I think the basic problem with this debate is that we're being asked one question only: do we like this particular Appendix 1? And we're not. What I would have thought would have been a better solution would have been if a resolution listing Appendix 1 as a resolution, and we could have discussed the items on the agenda as so we could have discussed in detail about whether we want to say this is best use of funds or not. We haven't been given that opportunity, because we said accept this or reject it. And if you accept it, you approve everything in it, and if you reject it, you don't like any of it. And this is not what we're saying at all. We put forward a number of things that we asked people to think about, and just to be positive a bit about them. A lot of you said you liked some of these things, but because the Liberal Democrats proposed them, you all voted against them. That was the reasoning. And this is the system that you get. The Liberal Democrats propose something, and or even if it's what you really believe in, you are forced to vote against it as a matter of principle, which is very, very foolish. What if we'd had this whole item on the agenda and perhaps discussed at a committee meeting where we could be less formal about it, and we could have gone through all the paragraphs item by item and sorted them out, and we'd have got a much better combined result. I mean, when I first was on this council, we had no overall control, and we had committees that really worked together, and all the three parties worked together and managed to produce a good answer. Now we'll get, this is the Conservative proposal, accept it. No, hang on a minute. But I like some of it and not other bits. So how am I supposed to vote for that? It just makes life extremely difficult, and it makes this council not being a positive proposal. What I'd prefer is that people in East Cambridgeshire can look and say, East Cambridgeshire District Council have thought about this. They really want their residents to do well, and they've got this thing which does affect East Cambridgeshire, and we haven't been consulted properly on it, and we would like all these extra things to be put into it. And that's what we want. We want the best. And then the Greater Cambridge Partnership will come along and say, you can't have all that. We can't afford it. Oh, hang on a minute. We haven't even asked for it. So, we're not even asking for the best for our residents, which is what we ought to be doing. We ought to be asking for the best and accept perhaps that somebody will chop some things out. But we're not asking for the best. We're saying, oh, we accept that this is a bit difficult. We know that there's a problem here. We don't like this congestion charging. Well, none of us want to pay taxes. We can say we don't like income tax. We are against it. Well, we know we have to be taxed. We don't have to be done in this particular way. There's lots of other ways we could deter cars. We could make the parking charges more expensive, which is what they're expensive enough anyway. And we could charge firms who provide free car parking, for providing that. There's all sorts of other things we could do. We're not suggesting any alternatives at all. We're just saying we're against this, we're against that, we're against the other. It's terribly negative, this appendix, and we could have made it much more positive if we'd all worked together to produce it, rather than coming along, imposing this on us in a debate at the last possible minute. just before Christmas, when most of us were expecting to be thinking about mince pies and Christmas cards rather than this really complicated subject. And when a lot of us, I'm sure, haven't actually gone into that questionnaire and answered the questions. If you haven't done it yet, please do so, because there's lots of stuff that you can put in where you can put lots of comments in, and it will give them a lot of work to do because there are many thousands of people who have already done this. But East Cambridgeshire district councillors, every single one of us should have actually gone into that consultation and done something about it.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. I've got Councillor Goldsack next.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to come at this from a slightly different angle, if I may. I'd like to share with you a journey I'm currently on with my father, Barry. Dad is 83 and he suffers from vascular and Lewy bodies dementia. The latter is a rare form of dementia that causes Dad to live in a wonderful world of hallucinations and dreams interrupted by reality. He's been in and out of those beliefs quite recently. Whilst in hospital last week, he saw a cat on a patient's head, a rat and a stoat playing below the bed opposite, and he was on a helter-skelter journey when they took him for a CT scan. This is part of the life. We do find some comfort in the humour of this, actually. However, Dad cannot deal with uncertainty or sudden change. He lives in a care home now in Soham, which means that for his many hospital appointments, either my sister or I drive him to Addenbrooke's for the excellent care he's receiving. Having to stop at Baber and Park and Ride, escort Dad from the comfort of a car to the strangeness of a busy bus station and a bus with his conditions for an onward journey of approximately half a mile into Addenbrooke's is not going to happen. I'm lucky, as is my dad, that a congestion charge, whilst annoying, is not the difference between me heating my home or eating that day. However, I'm sure that people exist who will have to make that decision to spend £5 or £10 they cannot afford on top of the fuel to get to the hospital to take a loved one for an appointment at one of the best hospitals in the UK, or put them through the indignity and frightening experience of a change to a bus journey to complete that last half mile. I fully appreciate this is the consultation stage. Councillor Wilson's just mentioned it a few times, and quite rightly so. Councillor Wilson, I've done it. I've been on it. I've read it. So therefore, I really regret being confronted with a sales brochure, a type of approach from a double glazing salesman called the GCP. Where is the consultation in Soham or Isleham to speak with these most replicating my father's given example? You say they've come out and spoke to us? Well, I on Twitter the other day
Councillor Goldsack, so I've got a point of information from Councillor.
Point of information. Sorry, I can reassure you that your dad will be exempt from the
Yes, it's not really a... Please, Councillor Goldsack.
Okay, 15 all. I would like to go on about my many friends that make a living in the construction industry in the booming city of Cambridge, who will face larger daily charges. Just have a little think about this. They're going into Cambridge to put a tap washer on and fix that, or fix a hole in the roof. Who do you think is going to be paying that congestion charge? The person with the tap washer fault, because it isn't going to be the construction guy. So we've got to think about this. I won't go on forever, but I want to mention my ward-based sixth form students who face 3 minimal bus changes, 3 times as long a journey as normal to get to their sixth form education at one of the many schools in Cambridge, giving their parents the pressure to drive them. In summary, and this is the point I would like to make against what Councillor Wilson said, and many of the good points he did say. In summary, this public consultation is slanted, it's divisive, and is not designed to gather the very data needed to make the meaningful decisions required. Like the demolition of Coton Woods for the new bus lane, this is another failed GCP-led consultation that appears to be steering everyone impacted to an ideological viewpoint of a few city-based councillors who think they know better than us that live in the rural communities. I feel sad about this because many of the targets for the changes I agree with: improve the public transportation, better air quality, greater use where possible of active travel solutions. But this consultation has brought forward an unwanted battle on congestion charging, without which other proposals can't work. Therefore, I say no to congestion charging in Cambridge, and I ask the GCP to rethink an approach that could boost tourism, business, support local health needs, improve air quality, mass transportation. And, as has been asked by one of the guests here tonight, What are the alternatives? I'll tell you my alternative, and I sold my alternative to Councillor Mayor Palmer when he was the mayor of the CPCA. I've been lucky enough in my life, believe it or not, built like this, to have gone skiing. Look into ski-type gondolas, put them down the middle of the roads, in and on the artery roads in Cambridge, from the park and ride sites. A tourist-enhancing, mass-based system that would get you from the park and rides into Cambridge and take the tourist cars off of the road that are coming in. This is my suggestion and my alone. I've not part in any party whip with this. I'm just saying that there are other ideas out there that need exploring. Charging for cars is not the only way. And I just think there's too many people out there can ill afford to be taxed for a necessary journey. That's my point.
Thank you, Councillor Goldsack. I've got Councillor Hunt now.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to put Councillor Wilson, put his mind at rest. We actually in our group don't force anybody to vote in any particular way. And I'm talking now. And however, we haven't lost 2 of our members and we've kept ours. I'm concerned a bit. I have for many years taken Councillor Kane very seriously and taken her comments with a considerable amount of gravity. But when she stands there and says that the Greater Cambridge Partnership has been to every parish council, I think, well, what planet's she on? It can't be the real one. I deal with 4 parish councils. Streatham, Wilburton, Little Thetford and Whitford, and I go to them quite regularly. And when I've talked about this congestion charge business, they've said, oh, we didn't know, no one's told us, we haven't done it. And in fact, last night I went to Little Thetford and told them about it, and they were so angry that they've already written a letter to me today, and I won't go through it all, but it just says Little Thetford Parish Council strongly objects to these plans going ahead. And most of their people are only being able to live and pay their bills without being slapped with an additional £100 a month. The charge is just unaffordable. And that's what the response I've had from parish councils. Now, we all know that houses in Cambridge are expensive. And we all know that there are 1 or 2 leading companies that are paying mega salaries and people can live there. But we also know that a lot of the essential workers that keep Cambridge going, who work in hospitals, schools, police stations, roads, drive buses, they don't earn mega salaries. So they have to come in. They have to come in by car. And if you think there'll be a bus service which will go to Aldrich and pick people up when they're working shifts in the middle of the night, well, I don't think so. Do you really? And I mean, Cambridge is the hub of this county. It's the centre of this county. We all look to it. There's work, there's shopping. It's actually got quite a good reputation for education as well in the world, and healthcare. And we all know that we have relatives in Addenbrooke's or various hospitals. So there's a lot of people need to go in. This will just make it very difficult for the most vulnerable members of society. Can I stress £5 for a car, and that includes a moped, £10 for a transit, £50 for a heavy goods vehicle. So, for example, if you were a skip contractor and you were going into Cambridge to pick up a skip, it's going to cost you 50 quid to put it there and 50 quid to come back. If you're a coach operator and you're bringing tourists into Cambridge, it's going to cost you 50 quid. I mean, this is really nonsense, isn't it? And the inefficiency of time, unless you live on the A10 with the bus service that's being proposed, and you get a bus and you work on the A10, you're going to have to get a feeder service into the main A10 bus service. And then are you likely to be working at Drummer Street? No, you'll probably need another bus. So you're going to take hours and hours to get to work, and that's just going to be a waste of time. I went to one of the consultations in the back room. It was a 3-hour consultation, and I was there 2 hours, 8 people had signed on. There were people in the marketplace, there were people in the shops, and no signs, no one went. They really don't want to know. And I think it's really quite disgraceful. I went on a march and a protest the other day, and I met a lady who was in tears. She lived somewhere out towards St. Ives or Erith, and she had a disabled son. She had to take that disabled son, who could only walk about 10 yards apparently, direct to the school. She also had a child who had a primary school place and another child who had a secondary place, and then she had a job. The golden era of a Greater Cambridge Partnership isn't going to help that lady. She's in tears. We all go. And another thing that came out to me talking to people is if you're a member of the Church of England, you can get a church in most villages. If you're a Roman Catholic, you can. Okay, I'll wind up. We all form minorities, and these minorities have to go to Cambridge. And therefore, we have to look after them, not penalise them. This whole business is a nightmare, and I oppose it.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt. I've now got Councillor Trapp.
Thank you very much. A number of statements have been made. For instance, Councillor Bailey saying using public transport is a loss of productivity. Far from it. I perhaps commuted more, perhaps other people might have commuted more, but I've commuted into Cambridge, both by cycle and by bus. And I found bus was most actually productive because I could sit there, not have to think about traffic. The bus driver did the fighting the traffic. In fact, I used it because we only had one car, and I found out that actually it was cheaper to go in by bus and pay for it rather than have a second car just for commuting. So therefore, and also cycled in. So the bus then at that time, this was before the busway came into the whatever, yes. It went half hourly, and the latest bus was at 11. It is actually a very good social thing. People would come back from the theatre or drink or having a meal in Cambridge, and we'd meet each other on the bus coming back at the 11 o'clock bus. And also it helped my children, or my child, sorry, I've only got one child. You know, if he went to Cambridge, he came back on the 11 o'clock bus. That was it. So, and also many younger people actually worked in Cambridge and came back in the bars and whatever it is and came back by bus. So that's one thing. The other thing I wanted to address was, are we talking about, is that okay? Can I speak, please? Thank you. I wasn't sure about the status of this. It said draft. So what does that mean? There's a number of inaccuracies in it. If you want a list of them, I'll give you a list. But I don't think I ought to be going through in this speech through all those inaccuracies. First of all, well, and the other one, which I think is important, is this draft has no mention of the park and ride, no mention of it, that people can actually drive for free. All right, they have to drive, but they go to the park and ride, and then there's no restriction on car ownership. It's just how you use it. So that doesn't change. People can still go to that. As Councillor Bailey said, Cambridge is a 21st century city. Actually, it's a medieval city, and that is the problem with it, actually. If you go to a 20th century city like Milton Keynes, you'll find that there's very good bus services, and very good cycleways through that city. It's a medieval. The 21st century parts of Cambridge are actually on the periphery. The Science Park, the West Cambridge site, Addenbrooks, the Technology Park, that is where they are, not in the center. That is medieval. It's outside that you have the 21st century parts of Cambridge, and they contribute enormously to the success and prosperity of Cambridge. Councillor Every said something about social exclusion. Well, I thought social exclusion is actually improved by better buses, that those who cannot drive will be actually benefit from having more buses, more frequent and over a longer duration. We did have something Councillor Goldsack said about his father. I'm sorry to hear that your father is in such a state, but he will be exempted. There will be the blue badge ones will be exempted. There will be no more cost than at the moment. And I love the idea of the gondolas. I think it's a tremendously fascinating thing. But of course, have the elderly or mobility restricted can actually use them? No, they can't. But for us, who are able-bodied, it'd be fantastic. I think it'd be great. It'd be lovely going through the city on that. Councillor Hunt, as usual, an heliocentric view. That's heliocentric, not heliocentric view. The bus, we had a very good bus service along the B1102, and it provided lots, and many people have actually went there to work on those villages because of the bus service. And as I said, it was half-hourly. That was very good. And I think the person with a disabled child will be exempt. So that is. So I think there's if
Councillor Trapp, can you just?
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Sorry.
My gosh, have I run over? Fantastic.
I would have let you just sum up.
No. There's no.
I'm trying to be genuine with the 5 minutes, but I'm seeing no more speakers requests. Oh, Councillor Jones, yes.
Thank you, Chair. I'm struggling to find anything new to bring to this conversation, I must admit, since all my points have been raised. The only thing I do come back to is, sorry, Chair, was not standing. Hope with the voice. And it's a thing I brought up in council meetings before. It goes back to my education of some school motto, not just for us, but for everyone. And while we are all trying to work out the best for our residents in East Cambridgeshire, I do sit and think about the people of Cambridge. Councillor Harries alluded to the pollution, and it's not clear what the congestion charge is for. Is it to stop pollution, or is it to control the congestion? But the pollution is a serious element, and unfortunately I can't quote where I've got the figures from. In my head, I seem to remember some 30 to 40 deaths a year in Cambridge being attributed to pollution. Okay, I know if somebody's put a dirty great factory in the middle of Soham pumping out pollution, my residents wouldn't be too happy about doing it. Yet every day we're quite prepared to send 2,000-3,000 cars, little mini pollution bits into Cambridge, potentially killing those people in Cambridge. So I do think they have the right to control the traffic in their town in the same way that we'd want to control the pollution in our towns and how it's done. That said, I've agreed with many of the bits of the opposition have put in. I sit next to Councillor Harries, and nearly all of his points I think I agreed with, in that if we can agree a more better wording for the congestion charging, in that it shouldn't be ruled out it's a tool, then I can certainly come around to it. I'd also like to see really the DRT bit put in a more positive light, as our lead councillor has suggested, because as Councillor Trappers alluded to, the DRT is for the people who don't have the access to the buses. If you live out in the middle of Pyme or in the rural bits, then you can use your car to get to the park and ride and then get into town. But I do feel people at Cambridge do have the right to control the pollution that's going on in their city, and we need to give that some consideration as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. I'm seeing no more hands at all, so in which case I now move to the seconder of the motion, which is Councillor Josh Schumann.
Thank you, Chairman. And I really will keep this brief, rather than say I'll keep it brief and speak for 5 minutes, because we spent nearly 2.5 hours hearing the same rhetoric. But just in response to some of the questions that have been put to us as well this evening, which is about what this council is going to do in order to tackle congestion, etc. And I'm proud to say this council, we've heard earlier, Councillor Bailey mention, have worked tirelessly on bus proposals, working with the Combined Authorities Bus Working Group, worked on walk and cycling strategies, which we've fed back to try and have sustainable transport. Few councillors have worked as hard as myself and other of my colleagues on trying to reduce carbon emissions throughout Cambridgeshire, not just East Cambridgeshire. I've approved or been part of a committee, which have chaired a committee which has approved carbon projects which have saved many thousands of tons of carbon emissions, and I'm proud of that. The environment matters dearly to me, and I know it does to my colleagues. We've supported Soham train station, sustainable transport, or indications of sustainable transport at its best. Ely Southern Bypass, which we were criticised of being car focused. I now know people that use the bus service to Ely because before they couldn't, because it was stuck in a long line of traffic time and time again, but now can use that bus service in connecting themselves to Ely train station and beyond. Those are the kind of real practical things that this small but mighty authority have done. So, and I'm proud of that. I'm really, really sad to say that I was elected to the county council just about 10 years ago, and I heard the combined Greater Cambridge Partnership promise schemes that were going to improve transport throughout Cambridgeshire, and yet here we are, and we seem to be unanimous in our opinion to say that the sustainable transport or transport schemes are not good enough. And yet we were at the same time told about congestion charge proposal, and we said this is penal and it's a stick approach, and absolutely reassured there'd be carrot before that, and that there'd be all these wonderful schemes introduced. And yet we've 10 years on, we've seen nothing but roundabouts which have been ill thought of, ill designed, having to be changed, floating bus stops which have been put in and removed because the Greater Cambridge Partnership are unable to deliver, quite frankly, any form of sustainable transport. And now we have a poorly run Greater Cambridge Partnership, a poorly run Combined Authority, and an even more poorly run County Council, with administrations having little ambition to tackle these problems. So now we're here, we're going to introduce a congestion charge. Well, quite frankly, I'm not going to support that. And to end on, some of my councillors, or some of the councillors have suggested this response is negative. If this response is negative, and by being negative gives zero legitimacy to these ill thought of proposals, which quite frankly are not good enough and penal in nature, then good.
Thank you, Councillor Josh Schuman. I've got Councillor Bailey, the proposer of the motion, to sum up.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's been an interesting debate. Thank you to everybody for their contributions. Just to come back on a couple of things, Councillor Jones talked about the pollution issue, which is, is one that has to be taken into consideration, but this is not a ULEZ, this is a congestion charge. That is its fundamental purpose, which is why the zone is so big, because you have to get enough money to support the entire proposals. I believe the pollution issue is somewhat hotly disputed. Cambridge is not in the top 30 list and doesn't have a significant pollution problem. And the deaths that are attributable to pollutants are particulates, which are not all generated from vehicle emissions. Wood burners, for example, are a serious element of those pollutants. Councillor Trapp talked about his lovely journeys from Bottisham by cycle and by bus, which is wonderful. And of course, that's what we want for all of our areas. But unfortunately, that is not this proposal. People in my patch and people in the rural areas are facing, if they want to travel to Cambridge by bus, they're facing hugely significant long journeys, which will decrease their quality of life and decrease their productivity. There's just no doubt about that. That is for sure. This long talked about comment about the insufficient commitment to road charging. I want to put that to bed. I've got an email here from the head of transport at the Combined Authority who says, to confirm and reiterate, the feedback from the DFT has been relatively limited to date on the bus service improvement plan applications across the county, including Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. The focus of the discussion and the feedback to date has been around the need for bus priority measures and enhanced integration with other modes. And as I say, I am still trying to unearth where that comment has come from. I think we have to bottom that out. Some members opposite were concerned that we should be waiting to hear the results of the consultation. Well, unfortunately, we can't do that. If we don't provide a response now to this consultation, we can't provide a response. So we have to provide a response now. I talked about the services not representing best use of public funds, and I absolutely stand by that. For clarity, I don't think running bus services around the Grunty Fen villages to and from Ely, which is what part of the proposals are, for example, at 1 o'clock in the morning, represent good value for money. Honestly, it just doesn't. They need to be more nuanced than that. I've spent a long meeting with GCP officers specifically on the demand responsive transport elements of these proposals, and I'm telling you, they are unsustainable. I've become a nerdy expert on this subject. If you live in Aldworth, you're going to be able to get into a DRT zone covering Cottenham, Willingham, Hadnam and Chatteris, and the idea that bus and another one to go with it is going to be able to service that geography. They do not stack up, and I really fear that because it won't work the way they've got it, hopefully if it comes in, they'll modify it, that we will just lose that service because it won't be viable. The statement in our final paragraph, it's only ever a statement at a point in time. And as it stands now, we do not support the idea of the congestion charge. The congestion charge is a fundamental point of these proposals. You have to say right now whether you are for this way of funding these proposals or not. You can't sit on the fence. Now is not the time to sit on the fence and not decide whether you are for this model of funding these bus proposals. We all want these bus proposals. We disagree that this is the right method of funding them. The members opposite seem to be all over the place on this subject, and I have no idea where they stand or whether they support the congestion charge proposal that is a fundamental element of this. It's going to raise 70 million quid. It's a direct tax on motorists. It's and businesses and people that need access to Cambridge by car for legitimate reasons. It's 70 million quid tax on our residents, Cambridgeshire residents. Now is the time to say whether you are for that tax or against it. We are definitely against it on this side of the chamber, and that is why I hope that everybody will support the draft response, which will become the actual response when we've agreed it.
Councillor Bailey, thanks very much. Sorry, what?
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. So we're going to the vote, and as been requested by Councillor Hunt, it's a recorded vote. So when Tracy calls your name out, can you say whether you're for, against or abstaining on the proposal?
Councillor Christine Ambrose Smith.
For.
Councillor David Ambrose Smith. Councillor Anna Bailey.
For.
Councillor Ian Bovingdon.
For.
Councillor David Brown.
For.
Councillor Charlotte Kane.
Abstain.
Councillor Lavinia Edwards. Councillor Liz Every. Councillor Mark Goldsack.
For.
Councillor Simon Harries.
Abstain.
Councillor Bill Hunt. Councillor Mark Inskip.
Abstain.
Councillor Alec Jones.
Abstain.
Councillor Daniel Schumann.
For.
Councillor Joshua Schumann.
For.
Councillor Alan Sharp.
For.
Councillor Amy Starkey.
For.
Councillor John Trapp.
Abstain.
Councillor Joe Webber. Councillor Christine Whelan.
Abstain.
Councillor Gareth Wilson.
Abstain.
So the motion is carried by 14 votes in favour with no votes against but 7 abstentions.
Thank you, members. That concludes the business for this evening. Can I thank those members of the public and press watching online and apologise that the live stream was down for the first 10 minutes of the meeting. Hopefully didn't enjoy your hearing tonight. And can I wish members a very safe journey and a very good Christmas, because we won't be meeting again.